Welcome back to Marriage in Quarantine. I'm so glad you're here with us this week. I hope that you had some quality time with your spouse last week and had some good communication. You maybe even had your first check-in. That would be awesome. Some of you, through communicating with one another, maybe realized you had some conflict that you need to resolve. So today, we're going to be talking about conflict and how to resolve conflict in a healthy way. Conflict is just a part of marriage. It's a part of life. And to learn how to do it well can make a big difference in whether it draws you closer together as a couple or it tears you apart. I can't tell you how many couples that I have met with that have said when they take the assessment that I give, the Prepare and Rich assessment, they oftentimes say that they don't feel like their conflicts ever get resolved. You know, and I'm sure you sit there and you think, yeah, I felt that way before. I think all of us have. Because sometimes, once again, nobody taught us how to fight fair or to resolve conflicts and to get to a better place. And so what we're going to do today is just go through some simple skills, once again, from Prepare and Rich, that are simple skills to be able to help you walk through conflict in a way that is productive and that you feel like you have a plan and you can put it into place and you can check back on it and see how it's going. So I'm going to walk you through it really fast so you can get together and have the discussion. I have a handful of discussion questions again for you today. So hopefully it will be helpful to you and bless you in your marriage. So a few things that are important to know that I think are important for all of us to know is that a majority of couples report that they go out of their way to avoid conflict in relationships. I think a lot of us avoid conflict because we don't know how to deal with it and we don't want to deal with it. We just kind of want to move forward and move on. The problem is when we don't deal with our conflict, we build up resentment. We have issues, people start doing passive aggressive behaviors and all those things that are really unhealthy and can cause problems in the long run. You know, but the thing is, research has shown that all couples have differences and disagreements. Studies show how marital happiness is more related to how conflict is handled and not the number of disagreements experienced. That's an interesting fact, you know, because lots of us avoid conflict thinking that that's going to help our marriage, but the reality is having healthy conflict actually builds up a marriage. So when somebody says, oh, we never fight, that doesn't encourage me as much as somebody says, yeah, we have arguments, but we make it to the other side and usually we feel better about it in the end. So I want to go through a few pieces of how to have healthy conflict, and then I'm going to walk you through the 10 steps to resolving healthy conflict. So we'll go through these and hopefully it'll be helpful. A few things you want to remember when you're in conflict. You want to remember to use those good communication skills we learned about last week. You want to avoid mind reading. Guys, I know, so I've heard women say it, I've even sometimes probably thought it in my own brain, that we just think they should know by now what we're thinking. They should know that about me by now. Or, I mean, really, I can't believe they didn't know that. The reality is nobody can read your mind. And if you continue to expect them to, they're always going to disappoint you. So be sure that you're saying what you mean and mean what you say. That's like a best quote for anything and everything when you're dealing with people in general. But so avoid mind reading. Focus on the issue, not the person. That's important. That way it doesn't turn into a fight right off the bat. Focus on the issue at hand. Take your partner seriously. I know some people think that humor really helps, and humor can, but sometimes when you're in conflict, you really need to focus in on your partner, listen to them, and take what they're saying very seriously. Stay specific and in the present. Don't start talking about the past. Don't bring up things that aren't going to be productive. Stay in the present, get it done, talk about what's at hand. And then if something else comes up that you know you need to talk about, table that for later, but stay in the present. Avoid overgeneralizations. This one I fall into the trap of doing sometimes, but I'll say you never or you always. Try not to overgeneralize because it's almost always that somebody can say, that's not true, I did that once. You know, like, so I did it 1,000 times, you know, like, so you cannot say you never. So avoid overgeneralization. Another big one is just to stay calm. And I know that's hard. We're going to talk a little bit about that when you get into conflict, how you can handle it when you can't stay calm. And then the last thing is you're looking for a win-win solution. That's something different than what normally we want to do, because normally when we're in a discussion, an argument, or trying to figure something out, we really want to win. I mean, we want our opinions to matter, and we want to be the one to resolve this, and we think that what we have to say is important, and We want to win. And so the goal of healthy conflict resolution is never to go in with your ready to win kind of mentality, but to go in saying, okay, let's figure this out and let's look for a win-win and see what can happen. So with that in mind, what we're going to talk about is Preparing Rich's 10 steps to resolving conflict. I will have a link on our website for you to be able to get this document so you have this in hand to look at. I would encourage you to print these off, have a handful of them. Use them as a guide. Sometimes when couples start using them as a guide, they realize that they kind of make their own. They maybe add a step or they take away a step. That's totally fine. Use it this way first and then build into your own way of doing it. But this is a great starting point just to help you as you go along. The first step in the 10 steps to resolving conflict is set a time and place for your discussion. This is huge. I don't know if you remember last week when I talked about sideswiping my husband. If we can say, hey, I need to talk about this topic, but I want us to come prepared. I want us to come ready with our minds and energy level and everything together to have this conversation, it's going to go a lot better. So set a time and place to have the conversation. Next, define the problem. You need to be really specific about what is the issue. I can't tell you how many people have said they've come to a conversation and they thought that they were going to be talking about one thing and the other person thought they were talking about something else. So be very clear about what you think the conflict is about and what you want to resolve. That's what you do right off the bat. Then you set your time, you decide together, we're going to come back and meet up. Those are the first two. Now, the next three you do on your own. The next one is, number 3 is list the ways each of you contributed to the problem. Okay, it's got 2 spots for that. One for you to list ways that you contributed to the problem. Here's the thing. If you come back with your spouse and y'all are reading off the ways you contributed to the problem and your spouse says, I haven't contributed to the problem in any way I can think of. I can't think of a way that I've contributed to this. It is not the time for you to say, I can think of this many ways that you have contributed to the problem. We're not going there. The whole first part of this 10 steps really should cause no conflict at all. It should just be conversation. So this is not the time to get into that. This is just a time for you ahead of time to process and think through how you contributed to the problem. So the next one that you'll do ahead of time is you're going to list past attempts to resolve the issue that were not successful. So you're going to try to remember in your own mind, what are those past attempts? There might not have been any, but if there are, write down the past attempts that you feel like y'all tried to resolve it and it didn't work. The next one is number 5, and it is brainstorming. This is when you're going to come up with as many ideas as you can on how to resolve the issue. I want you to do all of these up to number 5 on your own before you meet. Okay, that way you come with thoughts and ideas in your head, written down on paper, ready to have a discussion. And so when you come together, you will come together, share with each other those first 3 questions, and then you're going to hit the brainstorming. The brainstorming phase is not a time that you should really get in any arguments. That's kind of the point. Nothing so far should cause you to get into an argument or a fight or kind of cause everything to digress. During the brainstorming time, it's a time for you to share your ideas, period. So when your spouse is sharing their ideas, you're not going to make faces, you're not going to go, you're not going to say, that won't work. You're not going to do any of that. You're just going to listen. In fact, you might even use healthy communication to say, okay, I hear you saying this. To make sure you clearly understand what their brainstorming idea is. So that is that number 5. Y'all are going to spend that time going through, there's 10 spots for ideas. You can come up with all 10 ideas, even some funny ones, or if you're like me, you just want to get to the point, you can come up with as many ideas as you possibly can. And each of you listen to each other's ideas, you write them down, they're right in front of you. The next step, number 6, that is the step where you're going to discuss and evaluate each of these ideas and come up with one that you're going to try. This is when you just might get into some arguments. This is when you might have to take a time out. Here's the thing, if one of you is getting heated, if one of you feels overwhelmed, if one of you just really needs a break, that's when you say, hey, I need a timeout. Let's say your spouse is getting really heated and yelling and you know that y'all need a timeout, but your spouse is never going to call a timeout. That's when you say, hey, I need a timeout. You never want to say, I think you need a timeout. Don't do that. Because we want to We want this to keep moving in a positive direction. So you just say, I need a timeout. You know what? That's great. Take times out. Nothing is wrong with that. In fact, for some people, it is necessary. So for those of you that are like me, who really need to just get it done, accomplish it, want to finish this task, you've got to stop and allow your spouse who needs the timeout to take it, and realize that they will come back fresh and ready to tackle the situation, and you'll be glad that you let them have that break. Now, the one rule of taking a timeout that I want you to be really clear with is always give a time that you're going to come back to talk about the topic. I can't tell you how many people have felt frustrated and not been okay with their spouse leaving because they made the assumption when their spouse said, I need to leave, that they were leaving for good. That they were going to come back and have this conversation, that they'd given up on it. So you want to be really clear to say, okay, I just need 20 minutes. I need 15 minutes. You know what? I need until tomorrow. Let's get back at this at 6 o'clock tomorrow. Just pick a time. It could be a week from then. I don't care how long it is, as long as you pick a time and you come back to the issue and ready to have a conversation. Now, the second thing that's really important during a timeout, if you are like normal people, our normal nature is to go away and build up our arsenal to come back and ready to fight for what we want. That is absolutely not the goal of your timeout. The goal of your timeout, number one, is to calm down, but number two, to go away and think of any and every way that you can see this through your spouse's eyes. Any and every way that you can find compromise. So that when you come back to sit at the table with your spouse, you're ready to tackle this and try to find that win-win solution. It's not easy. You might have to take a handful of timeouts before you come up with a decision that's a solution that you're going to stick with. So, but in the end, hopefully you can come up with a solution. Once you've come up with that solution, the number 7 is you agree on the solution to try. And then number 8, each of you agree on how you're going to work towards the solution. Now here's the thing. When you decide on a solution, it doesn't matter if that was his idea or your idea. It doesn't matter if it was a mixture of your ideas. All that matters is you decide you're going to own it. At the point that y'all pick a solution, that means that both of you are owning that. That means that when you come back a month from now to discuss whether it's working or not, and it doesn't work, you don't say, I knew that wouldn't work. That's not the way it works. This is, you both say, okay, we're deciding this together, that this is the path we're going to go on. I'm fully committed to it, and here's how I'm going to participate in trying to make this happen and go well. Write those things down on how you're going to work together to make it happen. And then step number 9 is set another meeting to talk about your progress. That's the part that most couples don't do. And that's why when I said earlier, most couples say that we never resolve our conflicts. It's because they maybe came up with a solution, but it didn't work, but they never came back to say, hey, that one didn't work, let's try another one. So set a time and place to come back and discuss it. I have couples who, before holidays, they'll have stress with their families. So after the holiday, they're like, oh, that was horrible, let's do this, and come up with an idea of process, conflict resolution, figure this out, figure out how we want to handle it next time. Well, then their next holiday isn't for 4 months. So what I encourage them to do is, yes, right after that holiday, do your 10 steps, come up with a solution, and then right before the next holiday, sit down and go over your paper again. Go over what you committed to, what were the ways you were going to solve this, what you were going to try, just to remind yourself so when you go to that holiday with your family, y'all put it into place, and that's when you set up the time to reevaluate. And then at the end of that, you reevaluate and say, what worked, what didn't work, do we need to change this, how can we work on this? And that's the way it goes. This is really simple, but it's intentional. And that's the word that I'm trying to have us focus on this whole time that we do this marriage in quarantine study, is the fact that you have to be intentional. And it takes time, and it takes carving out some time. So what I want you to do is, I want you to look at the questions that I've given. I've given you a handful of questions for discussion. The last one's going to say, hey, try conflict. But before that, I want you to have some conversation just in general about how you feel and what things are going on. So the first question is, do you avoid conflict? If so, why? Talk about that for a few minutes. And then your second question is, do you feel like you resolve your couple conflicts? If no, why? Number 3, do you feel like there has been more conflict since the quarantine started? Do you think you have handled it better or worse than in the past? Number 3, what are your needs during a conflict? These might have changed since COVID. That's why we're having some of these conversations, because things have changed since COVID hit. Do you need space and time alone to think, or do you need to discuss and resolve the issues right away? How can you meet each other's needs and still discuss and resolve conflict in a timely manner? Lots of things changed during COVID, so definitely have these conversations, see what comes out. The next one is, what can we do to be more intentional about dealing with conflict in our marriage head on and resolving it? And the last one is there a conflict right now we need to resolve? If so, set a date and time right now to discuss it. Come to that session having worked through the first 5 steps in the 10 steps for resolving conflict. So I encourage y'all, take some time, maybe have a drink, sit down together, and just have a good conversation about these topics and kind of see where it takes you. I want to remind you to use good communication skills and take your time. Once again, if you need help, I am here. I am happy to Zoom with you. So feel free to email me, let me know that you want to have a Zoom conversation, and I would love to sit down with you and your husband or your wife and just discuss some of these things. So feel free to contact me, but I hope you have a great time chatting, and I hope to see you next week as we talk sex and intimacy.